hot. That's how I describe tonight's story. Just what I need to start my weekend off right. And I've got my little surprise package from AdamandEve.com right here beside me. You really should try that special offer. There's nothing like a really good, well, you know what I mean, to really start the weekend off right. And I can promise you, tonight's story will do just that. If you haven't done so, be sure to subscribe and tell your friends about Friday Night Fun, unless you want this to be just our little secret. So remember, go to AdamandEve.com, enter offer code FRIDAY at checkout, and you'll get 50% off almost any item. Plus, they throw in 3 free adult DVDs, a free mystery gift, and free shipping on your entire order. It doesn't get much better than that. Remember, use offer code FRIDAY to get this deal. And now, here's tonight's hot story.
The dinner party. If Rita heard one more joke that involved a golf course or a priest, she swore she would impale herself on the dining table's elaborate centerpiece. She was still trying to figure out just what in the world the centerpiece was supposed to be when she noticed her husband trying to get her attention. They were at the Goldmans, who were famous for spending far too much money on what was supposed to be casual dinner parties. Rita's husband, Danny, was seated across from her. Rita looked up and met Danny's adoring gaze. He was seated between Candace and Laura. Candace had dropped out of college to marry Danny's longtime business partner, who was going through a midlife crisis. And Laura was Laura Goldman, the hostess. Laura was secretly deep in the throes of menopause. She kept dropping ice cubes from her water glass down the front of her dress. When Danny had his wife's attention, he put both his hands on his neck and mock-strangled himself. Rita tried not to laugh out loud. Rita and Danny had been to better parties, that was for sure. "I'm bored," Rita mouthed to her husband. Danny mouthed back, "I want you." Rita smiled. Thank God for Danny. After 8 years of marriage, her heart still skipped a beat at his advances. "Let's go," Rita mouthed to Danny, who shook his head no. "Let's fuck," Danny mouthed back to her. Rita turned red. She shook her head back at him and said out loud, "You're crazy." Danny laughed. Laura stood up, grabbing 2 empty bottles from the table. "Excuse me for a moment." She began to push her chair back when Danny leaped from his seat and blocked Laura from leaving the table. "Do you need more wine?" Danny asked innocently. Rita knew there was nothing innocent about Danny. "Why, yes." Danny stopped her. He grabbed the empties from her and slowly guided her back down in her seat. "Nonsense. You're the hostess. Stay with your guests. I'll get the wine," Danny gushed. Laura actually appeared quite relieved. The thought of sweating up and down her basement steps with an armload of wine bottles was the last thing she wanted to do. "That's so sweet, Danny. If you wouldn't mind, could you bring up another 4 or 5 bottles of the Pegasus Cabernet? 97 if we still have them. Can you carry all that?" "No problem. My lovely wife is going to help me. Rita?" Everyone at the table turned towards Rita, who was flushed with embarrassment. "Of course. Excuse me." Rita quietly followed her husband out of the dining room and through the kitchen. They stopped at the door of the basement. Danny pushed the door open. "Ladies first." Rita descended the stairs to the basement where the Goldmans kept their wine cellar. It was dark and cold. Danny came down after her and felt around for the light switch. He grabbed her breast and casually traced the outline of her nipples. "We cannot do what you want us to do down here," Rita scolded, as she flipped on the light switch, illuminating the Goldmans' extensive wine collection. Rita started to examine the wines when she felt the back of her skirt flip up. Danny tugged his wife's underwear to the side and quickly inserted his finger. "I don't think that's where they keep the Cabernet," Rita sighed. "You're wet," Danny commented, as he slowly fingered his wife's swollen honey pot. After a few strokes, he removed his fingers and placed them on her clitoris. He pressed lightly and made tiny circles, making sure to vibrate his hand as much as possible, knowing it would make Rita crazy, and it did. Rita bent forward at the waist. She put her hands on the floor to brace herself. Danny rubbed her nether regions with one hand and grabbed her around the middle with the other. Rita felt like she was melting. "Oh, God, we shouldn't. Not here." Danny ignored her. He crouched down behind her. His wife was completely bent over in front of him, and he could see everything. "You look so good, Rita. You look perfect." He spread her delicious cheeks apart and buried his face in her, lapping up all the fresh juices. "You've got to stop. I'm going to scream." Rita was moaning with pleasure. Rita put the sleeve of her dress in her mouth to stop herself. The din of guests could be heard from the cellar. Soon someone would be coming down to see what's taking so long. Danny's cock had been growing steadily ever since he slipped his finger inside Rita, but the mere thought of getting caught down here made his shaft enlarge to painful proportions. Danny stood up and undid his belt. Rita tried to stand, but Danny put his hand on her back. "Stay, just like that," he commanded. Rita was amazed at the powers Danny still had over her. 5 minutes ago, she was all set to pick a whine and chastise her husband for even thinking such dirty thoughts. Now, here she was, in the basement, bent at the waist, pulling her own panties to the side, and wanting nothing more than to be filled up with her husband's rock-hard member. The fact that there were 4 other couples only a short flight of stairs away only made her hornier. Danny was standing behind her with his cock in his hand. He waited and watched Rita. He knew if he could hold off for just a few more seconds, she would be begging for it. "Fuck me," she hissed at Danny. "Do it now." Rita spread her legs, making a wider stance, and pulled herself apart. "Give it to me." Danny slid himself all the way inside her, and they both moaned with pleasure. Then he pulled himself almost completely out. Rita bucked back, not wanting him to stop. Danny guided himself all the way in, then almost all the way out again, driving Rita crazy. She reared back again, not letting him pull out. She wanted more, and he knew it. He decided he would tease her like this until she took the reins. Danny slid back inside her. Rita tightened herself up on him. Danny let out a tiny scream of intense delight and knew that it was his turn to stop moving. Rita would finish this show. Rita began bucking back onto Danny, rhythmically at first, steady and even. She kept her muscles tightly closed around him and threw her ass back as far as she could. Then, as their pleasure mounted, her rhythm got quicker. She was ramming herself backwards into Danny's pelvis and clenching her teeth to keep from screaming. She was close. She could barely hold on. Danny was silent and steady. Every time Rita would rear back, Danny gave a tug on her nipple through her cocktail dress. "I'm there, baby. It's so good. I'm right there." Rita was moaning so loudly neither of them heard Laura Goldman's footsteps at the top of the stairs. She stood at the top of the steps and called down to them. "Hey, you two, we're waiting for that wine." Rita and Danny both yelled in unison, "We're coming." How true it was.
Whew, I needed that one. After a long, long week, what would I do if I didn't have my Friday night fun? I know you're enjoying these stories as much as I am. Shh, and the best part is nobody even knows. Just like when you order that special something from my friends at AdamandEve.com. It comes in that plain brown box, and it's all yours to enjoy. And if you haven't ordered your special something yet, just make sure you do it while the offer code is still good. Go online to AdamandEve.com and use the offer code Friday at checkout. Like magic, they take 50% off almost any item. They give you free shipping, 3 free bonus adult DVDs. Oh, and a surprise gift. I wonder what your surprise will be. Well, you don't have to answer that. Do make sure you subscribe to this podcast so I can come to you every Friday. I don't think either of us wants to miss this date.